Howdy, everyone. Welcome to this live coding event. We are super excited about this. We have a huge topic, so I don't want to waste any time at this beginning because Joseph, as usual, is going to bring us a lot of knowledge and a super, very interesting topic that it actually came from a customer request. So it means that it's actually something that enterprises needs. But before we kick things off, I would like to remind you that last week we have the Appsmith Deploy event where we talk about things like 2x in performance on Appsmith, better tips on how to build correct Appsmith app that are actually performant. Also, we talk about Git integration, continuous delivery, and integration. And also, we talk about self hosting, like all of the options you have to self host Appsmith in your own infrastructure, like on Amazon AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, DigitalOcean, or even your own bare metal servers. So, make sure to take a look at that video. It's already on YouTube. You can also find it on social media. And don't waste any time because you have a lot of knowledge over there. All right, so let's kick things off. Let me bring Joseph on the table and start learning. Hey, Joseph, how's it going, buddy?
Hey, how's it going, man?
Doing good, doing good. How are you covering from the Appsmith Build event?
Oh, yeah, it was great, man. We had an awesome turnout. I think that was the most people I've ever seen at the
Yeah,
start, just like that were waiting. And then I think the peak as well. It was a really awesome turnout, man.
yeah, we had like 40 people already sitting there as soon as
Yeah,
we
just
started.
waiting. Yeah.
That was amazing. All right, so tell us what we're going to be learning today.
All
What
right.
makes you excited?
So I've got an awesome demo for today. Something I just finished building yesterday. Like you mentioned, it came from a customer request. We had a customer who was interested in auto-generating forms on a large scale for lots of different use cases. So we have the JSONForm widget, which does auto-generate a form based on a JSON object that you pass in.
Mhm.
But in this case, they they wanted one that's going to auto generate with a lot more config options and to be able to do that without writing the config. Like
Okay.
they wanted to just say, hey, I need a form for this, and go make it, automatically, and then go to the next one, because they were like one-time use, and they'd have to send out a bunch, and just some way to make that whole process faster. So our widget called JSONForm, I believe it's using this same library. I found a library called JSONForm, so there's a little confusing, but there's the library itself, which is just a JS library that it does the same thing. It generates a form from a config, but there you get full control. You're using it in your own kind of HTML, CSS, whatever you want to write,
Mhm.
and the widgets do have quite a few options for styling and everything, but if you need more, if you need to just have full control over that, you can write this config object and send it to the JSON form library, not the widget. And what I did is used an OpenAI assistant to write those configs from a plain English prompt. So it's a lot to cover. I think the best way is just to show you. I want to do a quick demo of it, and then I'm going to walk through just a couple slides I made that explain all the steps involved,
Okay.
because there's a lot to it, and I'm going to be kind of bouncing around between the regular Appsmith editor, the custom widget editor, some JavaScript library stuff, and the OpenAI assistant. So I think it'll make more sense if I kind of just show at a high level what the steps
Mhm.
are, and then we'll get into the actual build.
All right, let's do it. Yeah, bring it on.
Cool. Okay. If you want to pull up my screen, there we go. All right, so I've got this prompt where I can just put in a value and send this to the OpenAI assistant. You can be really vague, and I like just kind of messing with it to see what it comes up with. So first, I'm going to ask for a contact form. It's sending that off to the OpenAI assistant, and then that comes back with this JSON, which is the config or a JSON schema to
Nice.
generate this form. Yeah, I mean, you can be real vague with it, just to see what it comes up with. And then it's conversational. So it's going to remember that last prompt. And then I can say, make it for an Indian address with a drop down for the states. So
Cool.
it remembers the context there, and it's going to apply this as like a new message to the same thread.
Mhm.
And then we'll see what it comes back with here in a second. It's running repeatedly here in the background, like every 3 seconds, calling the API again.
Mhm.
So now we've
Oh
got
wow.
this drop down without having to type any of that or Google what all the state names are, and format that into a select input. It's just done all that for us automatically.
That's
And
great. But
yeah,
because India has a lot of states.
yeah, it does. And I have to use that fairly often when we're shipping out swag to our community.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and obviously our CEO and I
sure,
mean C-level team
the
are gonna be happy
founder,
about this because like our
yeah,
founder team is from the India, and I know we have to like sometimes manage all of these addresses. Man, this is great.
yeah. So let me do another couple use cases here before we get into how this actually works. So, like I said, it's conversational. You can add stuff to it. Starting out here with a prompt for a complaint for HR. Like the use case the customer had is it's just a big company. There's always something new they got to send out, and they didn't want to have to build a new app and deploy it every time. So
Oh
I
wow.
like starting out like this to see what it comes up with. Here, the department's like a text box, but you might want to have it give you more values. So let's say make it a department drop down, and just to be fun, I'm saying use characters from The Office. So we'll see what it comes
Nice.
up with here.
I'm a big fan of The Office, so I'm gonna like
Yeah.
this.
So there's multiple APIs going on here in the background. So yeah, here's the drop down for the departments. Oh yeah, I did do the names. Here we go.
Yeah, Michael Scott, Jim Hub.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So
Tuna.
let's do one more because I was just having a blast with this yesterday, seeing it would come what it would come up with. So we're going to do a nuclear incident report and see what that form looks like.
Well, you worked in the Navy, like you were part of the Navy, I remember.
Yeah. I actually operated a reactor in the Navy,
Oh wow.
similar to Homer Simpson's job. I sat at the reactor plant control panel. So here we got
Man,
an incident description, location, severity. We're looking at the amount of radiation. So it's pretty fun, man. But it's a
it is.
real business use case too, um, because you can talk to it and say like, okay, this is close, but now make this one validate. You can have it validate fields, and all that functionality is
Mm.
described in the JSON structure. So it's going to give you back the JSON part. You feed that into the custom widget, and then you can connect this to save that. So basically, you could send somebody the config, send them
Mhm.
to the app with this config loaded up. It would present them this form, and then you could save that response. And this approach would let you programmatically quickly generate all these different types of forms and just quickly send it to somebody. And you don't have to add a new table and a new page to your app and deploy every time.
Right. Well, that's amazing. I mean, yeah, taking away the fun part of the office and the nuclear thing. I mean, it's amazing that you can generate a whole form out of just a prompt, and it takes just
Yeah.
nothing. So that's what we're going to be building, right?
Yep. So let me pull up the slide now.
Hmm.
Actually, here it is. All right. So we're going to build this AI-powered form generator. It looks like my image here is not loading from ChatGPT. Maybe they're down. So let me get to this presentation mode here. Can you still see this?
Yep, we see
Okay.
it.
So like I said, I want to walk through the steps involved because there's so much going on, and I'm going to be bouncing around, and I think it'll make sense looking at it this way first. So the first thing we're going to do is get the JSONForm library working in a custom widget. That's not anything AI related yet. It's just how you use a custom widget and this particular library, JSONForm. And then I'm going to show the API assistant, the OpenAI assistant that I set up. And we're not going to build that from scratch. It's really just giving it a prompt and then enabling the API, but I'll show how that works. And then actually connecting to the assistant from Appsmith and writing all the APIs there. So there's like 4 or 5 different APIs and a loop that we have to run to keep checking for results. And then the last thing is to parse that response coming back from the API and be able to feed that into the custom widget so that it'll generate a form. And then at the end, if you want to, you can take the response that the user has entered and save that back out of the custom widget. So
Mm.
overall, that's kind of the goal. And then I want to kind of drill more into the API part here. So the first thing is we have to create a thread, and that's just like opening up a new window in ChatGPT when you're just using it online, right? Like an empty thread. And then we add a message to that thread, which is another post request. We need to know the ID that came back from this post. And then we'll run the thread. So it's basically we're done adding messages. Now go ahead and evaluate it. And then here we have to check for the results, get the thread from that ID. And I've got mine doing it every 3 seconds, and I don't think it's ever done on the first try. So it's running this on a loop. It's going to keep running that get on a loop until it finds a result. And then if you like what you got, then you're done. You've generated the form. But if you want to add a new message, then you're looping this whole part. So back to adding a post, to add a message, run the thread again, and then keep checking the results until you got a response.
Makes sense.
So that's what we're going to do. Showed you the app, and now I'm going to start a new page here.
Okay.
So on this new blank page, we'll drag in a custom widget. And we're going to start just rebuilding basic JSON form library. Now, not the JSON form widget, but this is the library. So it's from the JSONForm organization, and the repo name itself is JSONForm. There's also like a playground and live demo here. This shows you a bunch of the formats, what the schema would look like. So a single field and a submit button. Your schema is an object of fields, and then this one is a string and its name is a field. And then you've got the form and a submit button. So it's the structure that describes what you want in the form. And you can just click through here and see a bunch of different examples. You can do arrays. There's one here where you can keep adding new values to the array. So like here's a person, and then you want to add another one. Okay, so you can like keep adding values to this as an array of objects. So it's really flexible. There's a ton of different options. There's what do you call it? Like a rich text editor here, which we have a widget for that as well. But again, this gives you full control. There's a lot more that you can do if you're familiar with the library. So what we're going to do is take this example from their repo here. And I'm going to copy this into the custom widget. So you drag in the widget and then go to edit source. And first, I'm just going to clear all this out. We don't need any of the example code that comes here. And we'll paste this in. All right. We have part of the code's rendering. There's HTML here in the HTML section, and it does see this H1. But then this is just the whole process. I'm going to walk through how you debug this stuff. Most of it I figure out just by the kind of the clues that you get from the debugger or looking in the console. So what we're seeing here, the first error is $ is not defined. And if you look at the dependencies here, there are several scripts that it imports, and one of them is jQuery. So jQuery uses a $ as a variable, and there's some functions there to select elements on the page. It's trying to use that right here, and it doesn't exist because the source I've copied this from, everything is a relative link. It expects there to be a folder of dependencies and then this library, but that doesn't exist there, right? You've got to import all these directly from a CND. So we're going to use the JS deliver. This is a CND or CDN, content delivery network, where you can search things like jQuery and import that library. So every one of these I got from JS Deliver. You just like search, find the URL here, and then you can either copy that whole script tag or just the URL part here, and then replace that URL for jQuery. So watch the error here. $ is not defined. Different error now. So the $ works. Now it gets to $.JSONForm is not a function. So that's this library. Again, it's relative. It needs to be an actual link to the library. So we'll get this one. And here you can see that it recommends adding the bootstrap for CSS. But first I'm going to copy this URL and we will replace that for the JSONForm one. There's underscore and JSON schema validator here that we need as well. And then the bootstrap. So I'm copying this URL because that one was used right here. Okay, and then underscore.
So you're just basically bringing the dependencies we need from JS Deliver into the custom widget, right?
Yeah, and at this point, I'm not changing anything about the code itself really, other than just
There you go.
making it work by bringing those libraries in that it's trying to reference, but they're missing. So
Yeah.
you can see that now we've got some formatting applied from Bootstrap. It's starting to build the form based off of that JSON. This last one here, JSON schema validator, I think that's used when you submit. So it's actually working so far because we haven't done that yet. Copy URL.
And just in case for everyone who's watching and you don't know what custom widgets are, I just put a QR code on the screen. I put it while you were explaining, Joseph, but I'll put it
Okay.
again. It's just a link to our YouTube channel, which is going to show you the basics of a custom widget, what they are, what can you do with those. I know you went straight to it, and that's fine. But for anyone who's watching and want to learn afterwards, scan the QR code or find it on YouTube. It's getting started with custom widgets on our Appsmith channel. That's all I wanted to say. Keep it up.
Cool. Thanks, man. Okay, so we have replaced all of the libraries and the CSS here that was trying to import, but that dependency folder wasn't there, right? So we're linking to the actual libraries, and now everything's working. There's no errors in the console here, and I can type in the form and submit it, and then it prints it out to the bottom of the page here. So on the surface, we kind of have it working, but there's a lot of stuff left to do because we can't get the data out of here from the custom widget. We can't pass data into it to generate a new form from a different schema. So first thing I'm going to do, let me zoom out a little bit so you can see the structure. There's lots of script tags here. These are the ones we're importing. And then there's this one that's actual code here, but it's in the HTML section inside a script tag. So I'm going to cut all this out of here and paste it into the JS side and then just delete the script tags that were wrapped around it. And so you'll see that it looks like it's kind of working again, but we have an error down here in the console. And so now it says we're missing an Appsmith onReady function. So even though it works, it is giving us this warning anyway, not an error. But it says we need an Appsmith onReady. And that's because if you want to pass data into the custom widget, you have to wait for Appsmith to be ready before the custom widget loads up so that it's ready to accept something and so that value is there. Because you might have it coming from an API like we're going to do towards the end here with the OpenAI assistant. I want to ask it a question, get the data back, and then have the custom widget respond and load up with this dynamic value that we're going to pass in. So next thing is we'll add that Appsmith onReady. And this is a function that takes another function as its parameter. So inside of this Appsmith onReady, we'll just paste all of this code. And we are back to having it working again. And this time there's no warning about the Appsmith onReady.
Cool.
Okay, so we're getting somewhere. Now I want to be able to pass in data from outside the custom widget so that we can really supply this schema ourselves from the API. So what you're, excuse me, the JSONForm library here, it targets this element, which is the form tag here. And you can see it's empty. We're just putting a placeholder here. So it finds that element and then runs .jsonform on it and gives it this entire object. So this is a function here, but it's a named function with a key value. the onSubmit is a function, right? But really, it's all just an object. So from here to here, I can cut this out of here and use that as the entire config, or you can just do the schema. So to keep it simple and not do the function part, I'm just going to pass the schema.
Okay.
So I'm taking that object. First, I'm going to copy it just so this keeps working. I don't want to break it. And back here in the Appsmith editor now, we want to pass this value in. So it's going to come from the default model right here. And if I paste all of this, you'll notice that value does not evaluate to type object because these don't have quotes on the keys. It's not valid JSON, but it is valid JavaScript. JavaScript allows you to leave the keys off of there. So if I wrap this whole thing in curly braces, now the JavaScript engine is evaluating that this object here, and JavaScript doesn't care. It's got, you know, it's running like the whole engine to evaluate it, whereas like JSON is a little more picky about what's actual pure JSON.
Right.
So I've pasted that value in here now. Let me format that, and let's see, is that the, yeah, that's the whole thing. I wanted to make sure I didn't get an extra curly brace there. So now we want to reference this value inside the custom widget. So back here, it's currently hard-coded, but it's the exact same value. Now I'm going to take that value from the appsmith.model, and it's working there, but like that's the entire model. And if we wanted to put other things in there, it's all going to get mixed together. So what I'm going to do is just nest it one level deeper. I'm going to take this object and put it in a new object with a schema.
Yeah, schema is going to be the key of the whole JSON.
Yeah. So now I'll go to .schema right here. Okay. So it's working again. No errors, right? So keep an eye on the console as you're trying to figure this stuff out. You'll get it working, you'll break it, it'll give you a clue, you know, and that's how I figure these things out. So
right.
Now we have the model, the schema is coming from outside the custom widget. So let's see if we can change it. So this is called age right here. What happens if I put some extra characters here? Nothing. But if I refresh the page, the Appsmith app remembers that I changed this option. And now the next time it rendered, it is different again, right? But it doesn't change as I'm typing.
Right.
So the app is saving that edit. And you know, I've actually changed the app definition. It's just the custom widget is not responding. So we'll go back to the custom widget editor here. We have an onReady function. We don't have an onModel change. So there's another function here for appsmith.onModel change. This also takes an arrow function. There. And in here, I'm going to put the exact same code that's in the original one. We could pull this out and name it as a function and not have to reuse and duplicate code like that. But
right.
This is just a little easier to understand because there's going to be a couple differences between the two. So, okay, now we got a script error here. It's not giving us an exact error because it's coming from the library, from JSONForm, and it's not like, I don't know, bubbling up and to the level where Appsmith can see it. But we got some other clues we can go off of here. So I want to test this out. Even though we have an error here, we've given it something to do when the model changes now, right? We've told it what onModel change should do. So let's see what happens this time. All right. It did change the label, but it also added a new version. It pushed it down. See, the old one's still there? And now this one's here, and then that one's below it, right? Now there's three of them. Yeah.
So it's like a pending. It's not replacing the whole structure.
Yeah, it's doing exactly what we're telling it to. So the selector here finds the form element, and then it adds, it generates all of the inputs based off of that config. And then it's just applying them to that element. And we're not telling it to clear it in between. So also see the script error here. Again, it doesn't really tell you much more about it, but that's the clue. That's the thing that I figured out, that, okay, it's appending it. It's not clearing it. So how do you clear it? Well, I searched through the JSON form docs, didn't see anything. Asked ChatGTP, and it says to use the form selector here .empty. Okay, what is that? Empty. So this is actually something from jQuery. It is not. It's not a thing specific to the JSONForm library. They don't give you a method for that. They just, say clear your HTML element however you want, right? Well, this is a method that works from jQuery. So you can do that. Now, if we go back and test, let me refresh because that's still got an old value there.
Mm-hmm. jQuery's still alive. Who would have thought, huh?
Yeah. It's a dependency for this library, but it's a cool JSON forms, cool library. So let's change this back to age. And now you can see that it's updating as I type, and it did not duplicate at that time. Okay. So making progress. But if we go back and look in the custom widget editor, we still have that script error. Okay. This one, it just takes some experience of working with custom widgets. There's not a good clue on this one that led me to it. But what's going on is the custom widget will try to load the on model change a little too early when there's nothing in there. So what I like to do is make sure that there really is something in the appsmith.model whatever you're looking for schema. And so if there's not something there, invert it with a exclamation point. If it does not exist, then just return. The first line of my function is saying that, hey, if you don't find this thing here, then that's it. Just stop right there. And you can see that ambiguous script error is gone now.
Awesome. That makes sense.
So that's just something I figured out with experience working with custom widgets. It's not an issue on the onReady, but it seems like the on model fires at the very beginning when it goes from having no model to something, and somewhere in there it's like getting a blank value, or I'm not sure. That's what works for me, and that's the one that's not real easy to figure out from the errors. So I think that's it, man. We can pass in data and it updates. Getting data back out of it, but I want to switch over to the API stuff now, just so we can get all this connected and see how it works. So the next part of this is the OpenAI assistant. I've got an assistant here, and the prompt, it just says that your job is to help me create JSON form config objects based on plain language prompts. Look at what the user's asking, figure out the field types, valid values, all that kind of stuff. And I gave it a little bit of a code sample here. And then I've also saved the entire docs from the repo. I saved the docs to a text file and then uploaded that just to make sure we're looking at the same version. Because, it's AI, it can search the web and find like versions of stuff, but sometimes it's outdated. So I just did that to make it a little smarter. So then you enable the API, and let's check out the docs here on the API. So the first thing we want to do is create a thread, which is a post request. And I've got a data source set up already with the API key. Since we're doing this live, just to minimize having to edit stuff, I'm going to skip past actually enabling the API and creating the data source. We got some other videos on that and tutorials that we can link. So I'm going to jump past that and start building the actual APIs. But next, what we're going to do is create a thread and be able to send that message to the thread, run the thread, and then get back the results. So this assistant here, it knows its job, and now we got to call it and talk to it through the API here on Appsmith. So let's get rid of the custom widget here and starting a new query. So I've got my AI assistant data source already set up, and the endpoint here to create a thread. It's just v1 thread, and you send a post to it. And let's see, is there a body? I don't think we'll need the assistant again. Okay, and you can see the data is empty. There's no body. So you just send a post request. There is this header for the V2 assistant. I can't remember if I added that last time, but we'll go ahead and do it. Headers to inherited. Oh, that's already there in my data source. Yeah. So when you save an API as a data source, then you can save some of those headers and reuse it everywhere. It's also saving the authentication header, but that one doesn't get shown in the editor. So that's it. That's everything to create a thread. Got back a 200 response, and it gave me a thread ID. So now I can add a message to this thread, and I want to take it from the UI. So let's add an input here. And we'll call this message. And then back to the query, going to add another post request to add the message to the thread.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we have a thread started, there's the messages endpoint here. We want to create a message. And then right here to insert the thread ID, we just need a second pair of curly braces. And then we can reference the create thread.data.id. So the value that came back from the first API, call this add message. And then the body of it is JSON. And in here, let's check out the docs again. We want an object with a role of user and then content with the message. So I'll copy that, paste that here. And then in place of the content, we can reference that input message.text. So let's try out this much of it. This is the assistant where it's waiting for that message. We're going to send it a message, but there's a couple more APIs that would be needed to really see the response. I just want to see if it gets anything and gives me a 200, you know. So now you can see it got the word contact. It did not get form. Sorry, there we go. Contact form. So we'll run that. Oh, bad request. What do we got going on here? First error. Get. That's right. I didn't change it to a post. Okay. 200 requests. We have added a message to the thread, but it doesn't give you an answer yet. You know, you've got to tell it to run the thread and then wait for it to run and then check the results. So next, another API for this same data source, and messages run. So now we want to create a run. And again, that uses the thread ID, which we can take from that create thread.data.id. And this is create run, which is a post. So that's sitting there waiting to run, and we have the ID, so I can run this. Another bad request. What did I do this time? Oh, I think there's a body on this one. Yeah, I got to tell it the assistant ID.
Right.
So copy this into the body, JSON. And the assistant ID, oh, I did need that still. Let's go back to this one. There's the ID right here from the assistant. And now we got to run. So I've added the message. I ran the thread, but we don't know the results yet. It's showing the instructions. This is the thread I'm talking to, but I don't have a response yet. So now the last thing is to get the messages. So let's find that doc. Messages. Is it list all. I can't remember if it's that or retrieve a single one. Message ID. I think I want the list. So then this one is this path. And it's a get. Okay. What did we get? There it is. There's a value here that's returned. In the prompt for my AI assistant, I told it to only return valid JSON, but it's only able to return strings. So it gives you this stringified JSON and you have to parse it, but it's at least valid and it should parse out. So the next thing is I want to have something in between the API and the widget, so I'm not writing a ton of code inside the widget. So I'm going to add a JS object to do that parsing for me. And what we want to do is just return that value that's coming from getMessages.data, which has its own .data array. So we want the first element from that array. Inside there, we're looking at, is it content, which is another array, and then text value. I think it's just .text unless you tell it to only return JSON in the assistant. There's this extra option there. And so now I'm getting back the actual config object that would turn into a form here. So let's try taking this output and putting it right here. Let's see, is that the other side? Yeah, there's one curly brace I want to keep. Dot. Schema. Do I need to go in a level? Yeah, I think I need to go to .schema. Oh, it looks like it's JSON here, but I don't think I'm actually parsing it.
Maybe just text.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. It's a string. You have to parse it. Not that schema.
There it is. Okay.
There it is.
So contact form. Now, there's that whole adding a message and running the thread again and then checking for results. You can write some fancy JS to do all that async. I don't know how much time we have, but we can do it quickly with just a couple buttons. And I think that makes more sense at first. And then maybe if we have time, we'll write the JS. So we'll have one to add the message and one to check results. And so when you click the add message button, there's a couple things we want to do. Obviously run the query that is going to add a message, but then we have to run the thread before we can check results. So the callback for on success will be to, it's not really creating the run. I think it's just running the thread. It's because the second time wouldn't be a create. It's just multiple runs. I kind of add, but we add the message, run the thread, and then you could do another callback here to check results. Only if I do the callback here, it's only going to check results once, and it's not going to wait. It'll do it as soon as this one's over, and that's too soon, right? It's still calculating. So that's as much as I'm going to do on this button, and then we can just wait like 5 seconds and check results ourselves with this one. So get messages. And so now if I change this to event sign up, add a message, and it takes 5 or 10 seconds. If you tell it to do a drop down with a bunch of values like the Indian States one there, sometimes it's like 10 or 15 seconds. Hey, there it is. So I went a little quicker than I thought, man.
Yeah, that was fast.
We still have we still have to save the data. We're not getting anything back out of this yet. So like if the user starts filling this out and they click submit, there's a function that it's running when you save the form, and that is updating the inside of the custom widget. It's not giving us anything outside of the custom widget that we can use yet. So to tie all this together now and really be able to do something with the response, we're going back to the custom widget code. So edit source. On submit, so here's this function it runs, and now this is specific to the JSONForm library. Whenever you give it a property for the on submit, it's a function that you're supposed to pass it, but the library is passing the on submit two different parameters. The first one is any errors, and the second one is any values. So, I mean, I'm just naming it that, or rather their example has named it that, but that's how it works. That's how it knows the errors and the values. It's the JSONForm library says, if you put a function here, those are the parameters it's going to pass it, right? So I have the values already defined here, and if there's errors, do whatever else. Here's what it's where it updates the UI. So like as I put something in here and click submit, and it updates the response tag here from the HTML. There's a div that it's finding and updating the value. I want to add some more code inside this else block, the part that happens when they click submit and it's successful. So right here, I'm going to say appsmith.model update model. And this will merge in data with the existing model with whatever else you add. So I'm going to have an object with a property name of values and the value of values of whatever is being passed in right here. And so if I look at the reference, the live model currently has just the schema that we're passing in. And then if I type something in here and click submit, now it's added that property of values into the live model. So if we go back out of the custom widget and you look at the default model, you won't see it here. This is what initializes the custom widget. It's part of the definition of your app, but it's not the state. It's not like showing the response. So to see the live model, we can add another widget here just to view it. And then you reference that custom widget model. Okay, I'm not seeing the values at this point. Did I put it inside the schema? No, it should be .values. Maybe let's refresh because I just did that edit from the custom widget side. Give it a few seconds here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I know. Okay, back to the custom widget code, edit source. So I just did that in one spot here on the on ready. I need to do the same thing on the on model change.
Right.
Right here. If errors, no, right here. Okay. There it is. Okay, we got the data back out of it. Now
Awesome.
you can use this same binding anywhere in the app, so that custom one or whatever your custom widget's called, this could get passed to an API or a database query. So you could have one query that runs on page load to retrieve the config. You know, the way I've kind of envisioned using this is you would one time come here and have a conversation with it, say, give me a form to do this, tweak that, add a drop down, whatever it is. And then you save that config to be able to reuse it later in a form. Then you could send that as a link to somebody. It would populate and create that custom form on the fly, and then they could save the response back to the same row. You could have like one table for all the forms, and they'd each have their own config, and you wouldn't have to add a new table for each new type of form you want to add. So kind of a crazy concoction of lots of different
Yeah.
APIs and libraries and stuff. Yeah, it was kind of fun throwing it all together, man.
That was pretty amazing. I mean, for 48 minutes, which is what we have been here, but I mean, you have to remove the introduction and the final result. So I will say that in 30 minutes, you build a whole automated form generation that passes the value. And now that with
Yeah.
those values, you can do whatever you want. You can send it back to a Postgres database or whatever. So it is really good.
I would have went a little more in depth, but I swear I thought it was going to take way longer. Like,
Yeah.
I think I've worked with the OpenAI API enough that I can copy the results, the IDs from one to the next API pretty quick. But there's a lot to it. The first time that I connected all that and figured it out, I mean, actually, first time I used it was after Nikal had done a demo on it.
Mhm.
He made something like when the OpenAI assistant first came out, like Chat GTP was a thing, but the assistant had just been released, and he was the first one to experiment with it. And then a video he did on it was how I figured most of it out.
Awesome. So I know that probably for some people that was a bit too fast, but I know that Joseph created an article on the community portal. So right now you should see a QR code on your screen that you can scan and it will take you directly to that article. But if not, just go to the community portal, community.appsmith.com, and you will see all of the Joseph's articles, including this one, which I know you go in depth on this specific topic, right?
Yeah, so the custom widget article there, it is specific to the JSON form library, but without the AI stuff. It's
Right.
just the basics of like, how do you go from this library and their example in the docs to getting it working in Appsmith? So it shows getting those links from JS Deliver and replacing all the relative path ones, and just some of the basics about debugging and using the console errors to figure out how to get those new libraries working.
Awesome. Yeah. And the API is, I mean, it's just an API. Obviously, for you, that was fast, but you can just go to the OpenAI API documentation and digest it and see the parameters and everything. But with your article and with OpenAI API, I know that a lot of people can just reproduce everything you just did, sorry, into whatever
Mhm.
format they need.
Yeah, and that general approach of creating an assistant and having it return JSON, and
Hmm.
then parsing that JSON in AppSmith. There's so many things you can do with that. I've used it to do like a screenshot generator for those code screenshot tools where you paste in a sample of JavaScript or HTML, and it turns it into like a nice formatted, gives it a background with a gradient and everything. But I was producing them in bulk, programmatically, just giving it a prompt, and it would give me like 5 different screenshots. So tons of cool things you can do with it, man. Love to see what the community comes up with.
Yeah. And if you have questions, everyone, let us know. Reach out to us on Discord. Also, in the community portal, there are the comment section where you can ask all of your questions. Also, if you have questions right now, put it on the chat and we'll make sure to go over those and respond to you directly. But Joseph, I think we can cut it off right now.
Cool. Yeah, that went pretty quick. Next time we'll maybe take a little more time for questions or going more in depth on the stuff. I swear it was going to take 2 hours, so I was rushing.
Well, that's
uh,
good because we have time to talk about the monthly contest, which is about
yeah.
custom widgets, right?
Yes, that's actually why I wanted to do this one. It did come up from a customer request, but I thought, well, it's the topic for the month for the contest, so it would be a great time to showcase the full power of custom widgets.
Yeah, exactly. So, everyone, if you want to participate on this monthly contest, you still have time. Create your template, submit it on the community portal, and make sure to participate. We have been shipping swag like crazy, and you can be one of those lucky persons who receive some swag and also have some participation on the community portal by retrieving back to the open source project, and also you can be featured on our newsletter. If you are a freelancer who is using Appsmith to build projects, that's going to be amazing for you as well because you're going to be able to showcase your work by submitting your template. So I think that's it for now. Joseph, thank you so much for coming up on this live coding event as usual every month and showing us some of your magic.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. This was great.
All right, everyone, take care, and we'll see you next